will happen and a decision will be made on adoption. So we just ask that you hold your questions till the end. We'll whip through this presentation and we're happy to have a conversation after that. So in your pack today you've got the consulted on policy as it went out, copies of the submissions that we received and a staff summary of the main themes of the submissions. In the background, we have been on a long journey with you on this, although it's only been a year, which is sort of quite amazing really when you think about it, from the inception to now. We feel like we've done a really good process and that you've been along this journey. So go on.
So just as a high-level overview of submissions, we had 28 submissions in total. 75% generally agreed with the policy and 64% thought the policy supported themselves and or others. We've just got some stats from our kōrero mai. So the most prominent age group were between 41 to 50 years old.
Sorry, can I just clarification? Is that all right, Your Worship? So the age group that responded the most was not youth. Oh. Because you don't have a youth block there.
There was?
Yeah, I think that would appear that.
Yeah, I don't believe that there were any submissions from youth that we received.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, just a clarification, because in the previous, the other tables that we've got in here, it's got young people tailohi, there's one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
What table were you referring to?
That was an identity kōrero demographics 4.1. Page, sorry, my 17.
We can wait till we come to it. Yeah.
Sorry, I was ahead.
I guess I'm just expressing some surprise that there weren't more youth that responded to the survey about the policy. Yeah.
Good point. Mm-hmm. Cool. The most common submission type was via kōrero mai also.
Could you, have you got your microphone on?
Yeah.
Maybe you can bring it a bit closer.
Is that a bit better?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. And we had a mix of individual and group submissions.
Yeah, in particular, it's been, it was really heartening to see the groups that participated in the consultation process, and generally they were very much in support. There was one particular quote that we took out around this. It said, as a group representing tangata whaikaha, people with disability and pakaki, we endorse this excellent policy. The examples of the actions the councils could take would increase engagement with all sectors and lead to the inclusion of all are commendable. So I think predominantly all of those groups saw that there was value in us having a policy overall.
The majority of our submitters identified as part of a minority or marginalised group, with the main groups being older people, disabled people and rural people. As briefly mentioned, we had 75% generally agreeing with the policy, and we had 64% thinking that the policy supports themselves and or others.
So these are the main themes. I'm not going to go through them one by one, that came out in the submissions that were in support. In particular, we, as staff, we were pleased to see that there was recognition that our marginalised and minority communities do have an important part to play in decision making, and definitely the nothing about us without us principle in our decision making. So those were the two that stood out for us as staff. But again, it was a good raft of subjects that they supported.
You will have seen from those that were not in support, the general themes that came across were in relation to equality, equity and meritocracy. Everything all right? Keep going?
Yes, but you've got a question. at
Oh,
the
yeah.
end,
Yeah,
right?
beg your
So
pardon.
we'll let you get to the end.
Jot them down.
Sure, thank you. And of those that were unsure, in general, they were mostly pretty positive comments. They just sought some clarification on some of the wording that was used, the scope of the policy, and how we were planning on implementing, monitoring, and reviewing the policy.
That's us. And so we now welcome your discussion. Again, we just want to reiterate that this is a really good time to give us some early feedback before we bring back the draft policy on the 6th. We're going to go away and beaver away for the next couple of days to adjust the policy accordingly and bring it back. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, ladies, for the presentation. And my apologies for interrupting earlier. Didn't listen to the instructions. It does concern me that the Youth Council did not even put in a submission. And I guess the question is, how was the policy survey distributed and encouraged across the sector groups that you've got there, as well as the wider youth?
I can answer that on the Youth Council's perspective. The consultation period started on the 5th of December, and they'd gone. They hadn't come back in time to regroup to have an opinion. So there was actually no Youth Council proper on the 5th. Like they had finished their last meeting. I think
Sorry, just a
Yeah.
supplementary. So we didn't take that into consideration when we were looking at the consultation period. I mean, like, there's no urgency to get this. It's great we're in the process. But I would have thought they would have added a lot of value and insights, to the diversity policy feedback.
Yeah, point taken. No, we just did it as we did it.
Yeah. We also had the younger group focus group too, and that fed directly into the pre-engagement of the process. So before we went out and developed the policy, we had younger people attend the focus group, and that fed into the development of the policy at that stage. But yeah, point taken, and I think we tried to do a big push on social media, which a lot of the youth do use, and just some other methods of engaging with them, but yeah, point taken.
Councillor Isles?
Thank you, Worship. Again, just following on from the Deputy Mayor's point there, I also would have thought, we would have possibly looked at communicating with youth right across the district, because, it is diversity, equity and inclusion. So, it's a pretty in-your-face topic now, and I would have thought, we would have, a little bit like Deputy Mayor, gone out of our way to try in, some discreet manner, get their opinions or get their submissions so that, that would form part of the policy going forward.
I do take that point. The good news is that post policy, the opportunity for action plans to be developed, and that youth could come to the table and say, well, we want an action plan. Well, we've got an action plan already through the Youth Council. But the actual things that actually happen on the ground, this sets the environment, and then there's opportunities in the future for people to actually do the actual actions.
Could I just add to that? Just to respond to that, I agree the timing was difficult. The nature of this policy is we are trying to reach out to people who are marginalised. That's why we have this policy. And traditional channels that we do for other consultations simply don't work. These people are marginalised. And the nature of that, we took a different approach with this. We did a huge amount of pre-work with the focus groups that resulted in hundreds and hundreds of conversations with marginalised groups and marginalised people that actually developed the policy. I'd say submission-wise, it was probably quality rather than quantity in this case, but this is a new thing we're doing. This is the start of something. And as Karen says, actually some of the focus areas and the action plans that we've got as a result of that will make this policy much, much richer, and we'll build as we go. But probably traditional channels don't work in this case.
Right, supplementary if I may. The other one too, on page 17, the graph there shows, the older, the disabled and the rural peoples are the highest responders. Did you, able to sort of drill down as to what their particular issues were? Was it lack of transport, lack of isolation, or whatever?
Yeah, I would say generally for the rural communities, those were big themes that came up. Yeah.
And what about for the older people and for the disability sector, which are also very high in the...
Yes, I would say issues relating to accessibility and safety were the main themes that came up from those submissions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jukes?
Thank you. Just wondering, is it possible to have the policy go to the youth council's next meeting as a post-consultation document, just for their, even if it was just for their information, so that they are aware of it as a document itself? And while, you know, they may not be getting their feedback, it would at least give them the opportunity to, you know, to discuss it as a more finalised document, and explaining the process.
I've just had a quick chat. It seems that that's going to be a good idea. They next meet in 2 weeks' time, so we can definitely do that. They've only just come together, so it's a whole new group, so we'll hit them, hit them fast.
And just my other one, while you couldn't have included it as the youth statistics because it's a group, the TUI kids, what age group is that representing as an age group?
That's a group that supports children with disability and their whānau. So it's a range of groups, but it's mostly children. It's being supported by adults.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Boynton?
Kia ora, Karen. Thank you very much for your mahi. And just following up with Deputy Mayor and also Councillor Jukes, just regarding our youth, Mahiti, I do understand too that during that period there are exams and things like that when they're breaking away, and that group, there was a recruitment that was happening during that period for the youth council, so understand that. But I also do want to acknowledge that, and I've seen it in other consultation processes and development of policies where particular key groups are involved in the development, and then when it comes to the feedback of the draft, often they feel like they've already fed into it. I'm not saying that's what's happened here, because they definitely should be involved because they're part of the council, and often they can feel like they've already contributed a huge part to the development of it. I just wondered whether that in the policy itself, or whether in the report of the policy itself, acknowledges that part of the contribution that they gave during the development, because if we weren't or support a development action being done where they may be leading it, we need to have some trace, like how Deputy Mayor has identified, to warrant that. And I do believe that their contribution in the development is important to note. Thank you.
Carry on. Councillor Tanchos?
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the report and for bringing this forward. It's really great to see making progress. It's awesome, and I'm pleased to see the high level of support in the community. It's really cool. My question was around, one of the groups was the Kerala Community Incorporated Society, and we had them, they came and presented. One of the things I'm always interested in is how our council engages with different ethnicities within our community, because we have we're more diverse than people think. And so I was wondering, I know we've talked before about some of the conversations we have with different communities, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts about why we got something from the Kerala community, but not other communities, it seems. Did we do something really well with them, or was it just a random occurrence? Or?
Thank you, Councillor. My personal opinion, I think it's about capacity within those groups. I'm at the present working with 2 migrant migrant-based community groups, setting themselves up as trusts, and this is the first step in being able to engage and receive funding and do their mahi. So I think we're just at the beginning of it. We did do that piece of research on our migrant communities and reached out as far as we could. One of the things that came up very strongly in the submission was our lack of engagement with Pacifica. And I think that we really picked that up as a focus group. I imagine that once those community groups are established and feeling a little stronger, that a migrant and minority ethnic community group action plan, if they ask for it, we will definitely support that. And from that, we might get things like some of the programs like welcoming communities. We can't get that now because the funding's gone, but the program still exists in other places. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's just about welcoming all our newcomers, whether they are from migrant communities or not, into our area, and how do we make the community feel a bit more like they can step in and belong. So, it's on our horizon, just making sure that the community's got the capacity to respond to our requests.
I was at the African Christmas over at the Intermediate, which was really cool, and I think they were looking for ways they could engage with the council, but they weren't entirely sure, I think, how to do that. So
Put them in touch with me, and we'll go from there.
yeah, cool. Thank you.
I have one. GM Hatch mentioned that this is a new thing that we're doing here. We haven't. I'm just wondering how we performed, or how we've been performing, because I preside over quite a few citizenship ceremonies, and different ethnic groups, people from all walks of life, they've always been very positive about the way they've been received by our community. So I would have given us quite a big tick, even absent the policy, but it's good that we've got it formalised. Do you think, what are your views on how we've performed in the past?
I think there's so many different levels to how we perform. In the area of democracy and civics, I think there's a lot of work to be done with our migrant communities around understanding of democracy and how to engage with civics, education and awareness, their ability to celebrate their identity. There's a lot of layers in that, safe places of assembly. All of those things is something that within a migrant action plan, we might be able to start measuring or getting the feeling of them. But at the moment, I don't think we have any baseline information as to how we're performing or how we're perceived.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a migrant family and no one ever complained, but I've been called all sorts of names in the past, and well, they still keep calling me all sorts of names, so we've been consistent. Thank you. Councillor Isles.
No, you've basically asked the question that I was thinking about. The other thing I was thinking, as you say, rightly say, through those citizenship ceremonies, and you hear the stories, or the question is now asked of the people, why did you choose Whakatane? And to hear those stories is really quite something else. And I just feel it's a shame that we don't follow through with some sort of organisation which can bring those people from those various countries together again. And I did bring this up at a recent Sister Cities meeting, that we could possibly have some occasion celebrating one of these cultures so that they do feel inclusive of the, Whakatane structure makeup. So, yeah, it is something that, I think we've got to work on this and make it better, make it more inclusive.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor. I think that the connection between post-civic ceremony and citizenship and how we take that welcoming back, keep that welcoming door open,
Yes.
is something that we could definitely look at as how can we facilitate that better. I have had a conversation around doing something like a multicultural council, but every group that I've spoken to are just not ready to think more broadly other than what their own kaupapa is at the moment.
Right.
So again, it's about building that capacity so they then have the capacity to participate on a broader platform. both of the trustees that I've been working with these groups have got a purpose to participate in a wider welcoming sort of like base. So it's in their groups, but they just don't have the capacity right now, and we're just going to tie-ho and just let them get established and most probably support others to become established as well, because I think there's quite a few others. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, I just had a quick one before consultation. Do we actually have a register of numbers? I mean, at one of the ceremonies, people from the Indian community mentioned that there used to be only one Indian family in town and now there's 70. But I'm just wondering if we actually know.
No, we don't know. I mean, apart from the census data, but that's quite broad. You know, Asian is everyone. It's not, we can't go down to who's Indian, who's Chinese. So there's no, it's quite hard to get down to that micro level in a small area like this.
But we do have the citizenship ceremony data. We know where everybody's from, so we could collate that. Give us an idea anyway.
Absolutely.
Councillor Tenshos.
Thank you. I was just thinking where there are existing groups or groups that get set up, the citizenship ceremony, the people who come through there, they may well be connected with those communities already, but there's an opportunity to put people in touch with organisations that support the,
And also just keep in mind that it takes quite a while to get to the citizenship ceremony, so they are already a resident of the, I'm not sure how long it actually, it depends how long before they actually apply. I mean, they could be here for quite, lot more time.
That was
than
borne
that.
out in some of the comments.
Yeah,
that we
so
read out.
there's a gap in between their arrival and their citizenship, and, that's where I think we're starting to see the numbers really boost up. Yeah.
No further comments or questions? Well, we've ended fairly quickly.
Oh, is that it?
Thank you, ladies.
Nice job, well done. Yeah.
small comment. Someone, and it was picked up in one of the submissions, talks about cohort. I thought that was really unfortunate language. Be good to see that change.
You might see a change on that when the new policy comes through.
We break anyway. Oh, Councillor Boynton.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge the mahi that has done a huge amount of work and the long period that it's taken. And also too, you did highlight there the geopolitical kind of things that are going on, and just wanted to mahi particularly to our groups and those of our rainbow whānau, and in recent times with the Pride Parade, and just really want to acknowledge and understand how what some of our communities face currently at the moment. So big mihi to you for your mahi that you're doing, and it makes this so much more important. Thank you.
Just before we close this session, can I just invite Ayla and Karen just to explain the next steps, because it is coming to you for adoption on the 6th of March, and I think they would just like you to be really comfortable with the policy itself on the basis of what you've heard today. So is there anything you want to add about what's going to happen next with this?
The process will be that in your pack on the 6th, you will see a track changed policy and you'll see a clean document. And the opportunity for you to actually deliberate and make decisions on the submissions and how we have interpreted those submissions will be at that meeting. But hopefully we'll provide you as much information as we possibly can to make your decision easy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dennis has a question or comment.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question about that. Like reading through those submissions, there's some very good supportive submissions and some other ones. Has that already influenced the writing of this draft policy, or will that come for this next meeting?
So the one that you've received today was the one that we did via the focus groups, and we took out to consultation.
Yes.
Ayla and I have been working on a new draft that accommodates the feedback and the submissions, and this feedback today we'll go back and have another look and make sure that what the changes that we've made is going to be is appropriate for us to bring to you for the 6th.
There's obviously hasn't been hundreds or thousands of submissions, but some of those ones are very good.
Yeah.
So, very supportive in different ways.
We
So
have
thank
made
you.
already, just in our pre-work, a number of changes that are reasonably substantial. Quite a bit of wordsmithing, a little bit of tidying up of the definitions. But I think overall, I didn't feel like there was a huge amount of change required, just clarifications, really. But we'll have another look today after your feedback and see where we're at.
The Deputy Mayor has a question.
Just with the 6th March date, is that going to give Youth Council time enough to review and give feedback as well? Or is there a meeting after that date? The 3rd.
Meet on the 3rd. Yeah, so we could bring that to the table as a late submission.
Plus, we can go out online before we can go out today.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Our next item was the annual plan budget and consultation process, for which we've got budgeted 120 minutes, but we might need more. So I propose that we knock off now for 45 minutes and come back at 9:45.
What? 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, we've got it, sorry, 15 minutes. 9:45.
That's right, you said we knock off for 45.
No. Did I? You. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now in the annual plan phase of the briefing. We've got 2 hours allocated. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Welcome to the annual plan briefing. We are going to present to you today the draft budget figures and also some information around FTE. And we're going to work through the slide pack that you've already received. Is there anything Steve would like to say to kick us off?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I was thinking there might be, but actually I think there's just been a bit of clarification and prior to the meeting, so I think we're happy just to kick into it. Thanks though, Lainey.
There will be, the actual budget will come to you for approval on the 20th of March, so today is just trying to ensure you're comfortable with how things are looking and get some direction from you for any further changes you'd like us to make. So with that, I'll hand over to Harvey to lead us through the slide pack, noting that in fact Harvey is leading this project temporarily since Holly Allison departed, so she was leading it up through to the end of December, and Harvey thankfully has stepped into the breach while we just rejig a few things behind the scenes. So thank you, Harvey.
Thank you, Eleni. Morning, Mayor, councillors. Yes, annual plan. So staff have done more work following council's meeting in December, and we've made some further adjustments to the budget. And we are here today to provide you with some of the information, updated information, and also receive some guidance from you to be able to go to council meeting on the 20th of March to approve the draft of the annual plan budget and decide whether we need to consult or not. So most of the information will be in the slides, but I guess what's important is the conversation, the discussion. So feel free to ask any question as we go. So purpose of the day, we'll do a bit of a recap around where we are at today. We'll look at additional changes we've made since December. We'll give you an update on the FTE for year 2 and year 3. We'll look at the high-level budget with the rating impact. And finally, we'll discuss consultation or information campaign, what the requirements are and what we think. So a bit of a reminder around the time frame. As we've mentioned, we are today in the workshop 2. Then there's a council meeting on the 20th of March, and we need to adopt the plan before the end of June so that we can strike rates for the following year. So a bit of a recap. So what have we done so far, staff and council? So we've reviewed our budget assumptions. So we've made there's been quite a few changes being in our financial environment around inflation and interest rates since the LTP was adopted. So we've updated those. The staff and the executive members have identified some savings and made some adjustment and reviewed the FTEs. Budget managers have reviewed their budget. And in December, council gave us some guidance to develop this budget, and you will remember that the option 3 was the guidance given by council, which was to reduce the year 2 rates by a small amount and apply some of the savings to reduce the operating deficit. So under this option, we were looking at reducing the rates by up to 1% and apply some savings to the operating deficit. But I do remember that there were also a few councillors that were in favour of option 2, which was no change to the rates increase as forecasted in the LTP. I'll just pause here for now. Is there any question or comments?
Councillor Dennis and
Conversation with option 3 was that whatever savings there was, we'd use half of it to reduce the rates and half put away. So I object to the bit where it says up to 1%. So if we can reduce the rates by more than that, I'd like to think that half of whatever we reduce it to goes to the ratepayers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that probably is the intention, Councillor Dennis. When you agreed to option 3, we assumed it would be around maximum 2%, so it would be approximately 1 for each. But as you'll see later in the presentation, that has changed since.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
We
you.
will go back to this. I think I just copied what was in the council meetings report. Any other comment?
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, team. If you recall, that decision in December wasn't unanimous. It was pretty much half and half, and I still don't agree with changing it because we've got some costs coming around Three Waters that just make your eyes water. And to start faffing around with what we already established after 18 months of talking about it is a mistake in my view. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, everybody. Just this table that you have handed us, is this based on decreasing it to the approximately 11%?
Yeah, we will walk through the background to that. It is actually a direct replica of what is in the slide pack,
Okay.
but we'll walk through how we've got to those numbers and then explain them.
All right,
Yes,
thank you.
that does reflect the approach that was taken in December and then the work that's been done since.
Yep.
Councillor O'Brien, did you?
No, sorry.
Oh. So whether or not it was
Yep.
a massive consensus or not, we
We'll
decided something.
We'll
I
keep
thought.
going and we'll have opportunity to go through that
Okay,
again.
thank you.
So as mentioned in the first slides, some of the thing we will do today is to present you the key changes from the LTP Year 2 budget. So in the next 2 slides have already been gone to council, the slides in orange. So it's more of a reminder. So it was in the council report in December. You will remember that we've got a big drop around transport connection with a minus 8 million variance, and council had decided to pause the investment since we were not going to receive any Wakakotai subsidies. So that's just as a reminder. And there were other, there's been other changes added. I can give you a few examples. The local election, some increased cost. We had some increased cost around waste levy as well. I won't go through the detail of these slides. You've seen them before. But what I'll do is show you the next changes we've identified that needed to be done since December. And we've identified some new costs and some new savings. Some of the costs that have been identified are actually, again, driven by legislation. As an example, you can see here, Three Water, we've not got, council will have a bill to pay to the Water Service Authority, so that's been included in the draft budget. The draft budget in December didn't have any budget around local water down well implementation, so we've added there. And we've done a few refinements that are highlighted here. Any question, or I'll move
So the first 2 items, is this a case of government imposing more bureaucracy on us and us having to cop the bill for it?
You could
Well, I mean, I guess we're going to argue the point on our submission, but
The first one, yeah, go Steve.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the first one is, the levy So all councils are being charged the cost of setting up the Water Services Authority in Wellington. So that's our share of the levy, so it's a compliance cost. The second one is a contingency. We're planning for some costs around local water done well implementation. We have no budget for that in our LTP, and also there's doesn't sort of seem to be any indication from central government, like there was last time, that they're going to provide some funding support. So the finance team has put in a line there just as a contingency to support that. So those are the first two items.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Dukes and then Councillor Boynton.
Thank you. Just back on page 23, under democracy, local elections 2025 increase costs 150,000. I mean, we do this every 3 years, so I'm just wondering what's caused 150 increase from what we would have budgeted for. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. I'd just be curious to know what it is.
We haven't renewed the contract for a couple of years, and when we've contract for election services has gone up by that much, and we have queried it, but it's the same across all councils. So it's that's just been compounded. I forget the term of the contract, the length, but it's because we renew it every 3 or 4 years that that's just how much it's gone up over that period.
Looked at other providers as well?
We have, yes.
And it's still that much? Wow.
Yeah, it's same across the board.
Nothing to do
Thank
with
you.
additional costs from the referendum?
No.
No, okay. Any other questions? Councillor Boynton?
Oh, that was my question. Did it include,
Sorry.
did the increase in costs include, was that because of the referendum?
It's marginal, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay.
What were we saying for that? About 20,000 additional? Or not even that?
I think the official figure is around 16,000, but
Okay.
it is, we've talked about this
in the scheme
previously,
of
when you
things-
add in staff time and everything,
Yep.
it's much more.
Supplementary. Related to local elections, currently at the moment there is a working group that is looking at changes to the electoral reform and how local elections are done, which will pose to the public whether or not these processes are centralised with the electoral commission and not necessarily run by individual councils. Do you believe that might improve things or for councils if there was a central organisation that ran them, cost-wise?
I'd have to see more information. I'd have to see more information on that. I can't give you any comment on that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask if we've got any additional projections on inflation and interest rate movements? Because it looks like in some places inflation is looking pretty stubborn, and do we need to rethink any of that, or are we just going with those assumptions that we started this LTP with?
We'll send out inflation forecasts every October to councils. So the inflation's changed in this annual plan, and we've put through those changes.
But I'm thinking of...
And more recently, we have reviewed the interest rate assumptions in there as well, which have gone up slightly from the reduction that we had in the LTP. There's still opportunity to look at those again before we go to adoption in March.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. We're just on this next slide here. This funding gap of 750,000 for servicing our debt, would we have that if we stayed at the 12.7% from the long-term plan for that year? Because is this going to just keep increasing, $750,000 each year?
No, this one's a retrospective change. So the the gap loans, when they were developed in the LTP, had a 25-year term for repayment. So, and there's some information a bit further on about it. What we've discussed and modelled is changing that from a 25-year term down to a 10-year term, because we don't think ratepayers in 25 years' time should be paying for the deficits we're incurring today. So the 754,000 is the operational rating impact of that change.
All right, thank you for that.
Might just want to add to the reduction in the total loan amount by reducing the term.
That's covered off in those slides in front,
Okay.
a bit further on.
Councillor Boynton?
Sorry, this was referring to the previous slide, just regarding the local water done well and the costs there. So the over $600,000 in costs that we have had to come up with, that wasn't, you've identified that wasn't previously planned as part of the budget. So are these directly related because it's a new policy that's come through from the government?
I guess the simple answer is yes. Yeah, we essentially had funding, through a transition fund for previous work on the Three Waters area. There is no funding now to carry us through. Our only opportunity is any better off funding money that is unspent. The government is encouraging us to spend that on local waters done well work, but we have generally spent our better off funding money. So this is a true cost to us.
Thank you. And also too, with the reduction in the roading budget of nearly $8.5 million, obviously that makes it harder for the council to be able to cover those costs, plus increased costs. How does that look for our ratepayers, our whānau, who are struggling out there?
What?
Way you go, Dave.
I was going to comment specifically in terms of the transport budget. I mean, we've been through a bit of a process to essentially downscale the program of work. That in itself, hasn't incurred additional costs or ratepayer costs, but of course the amount of work that we've done is less. So there could be a catch-up point in some point in the future where work that otherwise would have been done now has been essentially deferred.
So basically there's a reduction in the mahi that was going to be planned, and that work would then be done much later when we are able to afford it.
That's right.
Well, when Waka Kotahi looks at funding this region, because they've got quite a focus on national roads of significance, and none of those are in our region. And so I think when we worked through that program, we identified there was only one improvement project that they'd considered funding for us. And I think that was in the Bay of Plenty region. So, the reduction in the whole program that we've had to make as a result will create some operational or rate savings, but then there's the level of service reductions or impacts of the stuff that we planned to do but couldn't do.
Thank you.
Since I've been on council, I've been talking about affordability. Everybody probably thinks about it here. I'm not the only one, but what I wanted was something quantitative. I have had a go at it myself. You and I have shared some views on it. It's a tricky thing to evaluate, but unless you have some sort of number in your head about what the community can support, it's hard to decide how much money you're going to have to spend. Well, that's at least the way I think about it. Are we, when we started the LTP process, I asked numerous times for the same sort of thing, a robust quantitative assessment of what affordability means. We got it something like that at the end of the LTP process. Now we're going into an annual plan. I know, Bevan, you're doing something in that area. But is that ever going to be put on the table, or when are we going to do that? Are we warming up to it for the next LTP, or are we going to, is that going to be factored into our thinking for this?
I think where you get to following this workshop will give a direction of travel. Then I think the next bit would be assess whether there are any affordability challenges as a result of it. They'll be in pockets and areas. The challenge you have doing it in an annual plan is you have to change rates to be able to impact where rates are landing. And the time to do that is through development of an LTP, where you think about what is your revenue and financing policy, who benefits or who exacerbates for the activities we provide, and how should we fund them. Your ability to do that through an annual plan or make significant changes through an annual plan process is limited unless you go through
The entire process.
Yeah. So if we're working through a plan which is based on the previous LTP, it's very difficult to make significant changes. We can make smaller changes that fit within the realm. So we'll look at that once we've got some direction from today.
Yeah, normally annual plans are about minor sort of adjustments, not major overhauls, unless there are some sort of extremely extenuating circumstances. Now, between this year and last year, probably things haven't. I don't think you would say that that there are extenuating circumstances, or that the panorama has changed all that much. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some changes driven on us from central government. We just talked about the cut to the roading program. We've got a lot of uncertainty and planning to do around local water's done well. I expect some of the changes that might come out of the water rating review conversation may trigger a need to have some consultation ahead of the next annual plan. If we're thinking about equalising water charges, for example. So that's probably your next real good opportunity to look at whether you can make some rating changes based on affordability.
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I guess keep banging on about it, but affordability means a lot of things, and affordability might not mean just money. If you defer stuff, then what's it going to cost next time? So the affordability thing doesn't go away. I think for years we probably haven't had enough income, to be honest. And you can't get all the income from rates, obviously, but we can't continue to borrow either. So I'm afraid that we're treating the wrong path in some ways, is that we're just making the road harder for someone else, I guess, which is why I'm saying we should leave the thing alone as it is.
Well, yeah, thank you, Councillor Puller. You keep on banging on about it, and I will continue to bang on about it, if that's the way you want to put it. But anyway, Councillor Tanchos.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, to support John's point, I mean, we've got this operating deficit which has escalated over the term of this council, and that's exactly why, because we've been reluctant to properly rate, and so we've borrowed to pay operating costs instead, and that's not a sustainable model for anyone. Mia, I know that you've talked about wanting some quantitative basis or some robust way of talking about affordability. You talked about it for a while. And I think the challenge is that it's not a simple thing to do. You had a go at it, but it contained your back of the envelope contained a number of assumptions that kind of you couldn't really substantiate. It, like, for example, the way that rates flow through to rentals. So it's a really complex piece of work, and I think we're asking a lot of staff if we expect them to come up with something like that, because that's probably a PhD, and the staff are just trying to work out the budgets and kind of keep things moving along. I'm not sure that it's realistic to expect staff to come up with a robust metrics for what is affordability in our community when economists are going to be arguing about that forever, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, in our heads we've all got some idea of what it is, because in a household you have a fixed income, most people, this is what comes in, and so you can't go around doing things that don't fit within your income. If you don't have the income, you've got various options. You can go and make some more money, which is what we're trying to do, or you can borrow more money, which is what we are doing. So what other options does a household have? And in that respect, we're not that much different. My question is, how much is that fixed income how much blood can we get out of the stone? But anyway, Councillor James.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what John and Nando were saying, that are we looking at affordability for this next 12 months, 2 years? We're looking at it for 10 years. And if you look at it long term, we can't afford to keep deferring a lot of our expenses as we go. Otherwise, we end up where we are with the Three Waters situation. We're getting that far behind, our roading's starting to get behind. It's just not sustainable. So somewhere along the line, we just got to face up. And like any other business in that, people move their own budgets to suit. But I think we've just got to keep charging on, carefully charging on, I suppose I would word it, not just going hell for leather for the sake of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Worship. I mean, I'm going to hark back to 2004 when I came into council. Our external debt then was in single figure millions. Look where it is now. So, I mean, we haven't been deferring. We've just been boxing on all these years. And I'm afraid I agree with the Mayor. I mean, you've got to look at a family income and a family budget. And if we're going to impose additional costs, in most cases, myself included, we're restrained as to how much we've got in the bank, and we're restrained as to how much we can earn over and above to try and keep up with the so-called expenditure. Trying to deal with just everyday costs like inflation, insurance rises, fuel rises, etc. We've got to be realistic, you know. And I think it comes from the top. We have got to be very, very aware that where is all this going to end? I take on board what Councillor Potter says with regards to local water done well. Yes, I know that is a biggie and it's something that we've really got to get our heads around. But there is other things that we've really got to, I think, sharpen the pencil on and say, let's have another good look at it. We've got to try and keep that rate rise down to a realistic level on today's economy. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. Councillor Dennis.
I've got a household living close by me who the other day when we fixed a water leak in the pipeline, they sent an air bubble down the line and it blew the shower rose out of their shower. This person can't afford to fix it. She's too scared to get a plumber in because she hasn't got the budget for it. I think we need to realise that there are people who have been successful in our community and they've got a bit of extra up their sleeve and they can cope with a little bit of rate rise and things like that. There's a growing number of people in our community that are struggling. So this person can't shower anymore, you know, and God knows how they're doing it. I think we need to be aware of all the different socioeconomic people in our community, the diversity in our community, and that not everyone can keep paying 12.7% increase in their rates year after year. And I agree with Mr Poller and the others that we need to do the basics. We need to do the water. We need to do things like that. But maybe we need to look in some of the other wellbeing areas and relook at what we're doing at Rex Morpeth Park and some of those others, which could, I mean, we've got perfect playing fields down there, but we want to rejig it for some reason. We need to look at some way to reduce the rates so that some of our people can afford to eat. Thank you.
I'll let you go before Councillor Boynton.
I just wanted to acknowledge what all of you have said and just let you know that there's actually a part coming in this presentation which talks about further changes to the rates that executive have spent quite a bit of time looking at, particularly around FTE, and that will make, potentially, if you agree with the approach that we're presenting today, that could make further changes that you're potentially considering. So I was going to encourage that we move a little bit further through the slide pack and then revisit this conversation because it's a really important conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you know, before Christmas we came to sort of this table is about compromises. Ultimately, we're not all of the same view on anything, but in the end you end up somewhere that everybody can live with. I was comfortably uncomfortable with what we did before Christmas, but, you know, that's where we landed. And if we proceed on that basis, this is where this is heading, right, mostly. So we'll I'll let Councillor Boynton have a word, and then maybe we can keep charging along a bit. Thanks.
Kia ora. I just really wanted to follow on from others who have spoken. I mean, I understand that the sort of ethos of wanting to make sure that we forge ahead so we make it easier into the future. But also too, there's so much noise that's happening across our nation at the moment. And what we're not really hearing and what we're not really seeing is the reality, and that employment is at its unemployment rates are at their highest that they've been than in the last 5 years. And that impacts on our community. Over 50,000 people, New Zealanders, have lost their jobs in the last 12 months. That is huge. It's one of the highest job losses that have happened in our country. Over 100,000 people have left New Zealand in the last 12 months, one of the highest since records began, over 100,000. And some of those whānau are from here. A lot of them are. We've had more families go into poverty in these last 12 to 18 months than we've ever had before. These are just not being seen or talked about, like, you know, as much as they should be. Social services, other national organisations who provide food banks have said it is at its worst levels they have ever seen. These are significant factors when we have to look at the affordability of our whānau, but it's also those who are able to actually pay their rates for us to still have some form of rating income to be able to turn those services over. You know, there has to be a balance there. If we face the statistics that are currently out there at the moment, we are at some of our worst levels. We may hear things about growth, we may hear about an ease of inflation, but what we're not hearing is the reality that is happening on the ground. And sadly, we will only see the worst of it when somebody dies. So, sorry to be so dramatic, but it's just understanding that there's significant deprivation that is happening currently in this country. And we have to acknowledge that in our local communities. People are just getting on with it. People are becoming complacent about how bad things really are. There's basically becoming a normalisation of how terrible it is, and so it's not talked about as much, but those are the statistics, and we have to understand to be able to keep paying rates, to be able to keep our local economy going and turning over, we do have to make it affordable, or it's not even going to be affordable for the council. Kia ora.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to say anything else, but I do want to tell Toko that I was doing some recreational stuff the other day and got called up by a guy in Edgecombe who chewed my ear off for half an hour, swearing black and blue about how we should appoint commissioners and all the rest of it. He's got 3 pensioners living on his property, and he's claiming he's not going to pay his rates, and that there are a lot of other people who are going to do the same thing. Like, you know, this is the sort of thing you get as an elected member, and so I do agree with a lot of that, well, obviously, but anyway, do carry on.
Thank you. As Lenny mentioned, we'll have the opportunity to discuss that again.
Could you
yeah. Is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll just keep going through the variation, then we'll discuss FTE, and then we'll go through the budget. So that slides, it's the second slides of the changes we've made since December. Bevan has touched around the interest change and the funding gap. We'll have some slides around those. Fee and charges, given the current economy, we've got loss of expected revenue, so the item you see is there is to compensate it. So last item is an item where we would need some guidance from council to decide whether we want to include it into the budget or not. The item was requested by council for staff to provide some costings, and we've got Annalise Reynolds, Manager Transportation, here to give us a bit more information around this so that we can receive some guidance from you guys.
The shared use path is the bike path.
It's shared use between pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah, and it's been there for 50 years. Well, I'm just guessing. It wasn't bad, Nick, and I offered to fill the holes myself if somebody gave me some tar seal. 180,000, was it, or something? Surely. I mean, let's just patch it up and make it usable for just a few bucks. I think that's my view on that one. I know it's not great, and I've complained about it a lot myself, but it is usable. And, and when times are tough, and I think that the waters are looking pretty choppy going forward as well, we need to maybe put some things on hold. But anyway, my view anyway.
Thanks for that. So just providing a bit of information and running through these options. So this came about because it was requested in some previous engagements with councillors that there was a desire to at least see what the pricing of a renewal of that shared use path would be. So we've run through a range of different options, which are noted on the screen. So the do nothing approach, just as it's worded there, and just to explain, it's not do absolutely nothing, it's just do nothing additional to what we would on any other footpath or shared use path over the next 3 years. So we would still do any reactive maintenance, and that would be covered through existing, our now reduced, but existing footpath and shared use path maintenance and renewal budgets. So that's why it's a $0 increase, because it would just be working within those budgets. The minor AC repairs to damaged sections only is just doing a bit more than a small patch up. It's so that you're patching up the worst areas, so it's not a full renewal. But it will at least do better than what we would see just stretching it within our existing budgets, and that's where that price has come from, and it documents the rating impact if that was selected. Then there's a couple of different asphaltic concrete, sorry. It's the black stuff that you see on roads where it's got a more smooth finish than a chip seal. So there's a couple of options for a 2 metre wide path, and then a couple of options for a 3 metre wide path, obviously both with quantities and because also the alignment changes or needs to be widened, a 3 metre path becomes more expensive. And there's both an unsealed option and a concrete option. And the reason we've included an unsealed option is even though the current path is sealed, we have been doing a number of unsealed shared use paths along riverbanks and such like, where it's in a more connecting area rather than like in town. So again, thinking outside the box of how to keep costs affordable, we've included that option as well. We did also look into some chip seal options because sometimes they can be cheaper than concrete, but still provide a sealed and relatively long life. However, because the shared use path, and in particular this one, is a lot smaller than a road, all of the typical plant that's used to seal a road is much too large to fit on the alignment for this path, and so it would actually become quite costly having to widen everything to get the plant in there, or trying to locate specialist plant, which we found there wasn't any located in the Bay of Plenty region. So we decided not to explore that option any further.
Councillor Tanchos?
There's a substantial saving between unsealed and concrete, and I'm assuming that unsealed has higher maintenance, but if you've got an unsealed road, you've got heavy vehicles, whereas bicycles and walkers, it's not much. So can you give us a sense of the maintenance difference on an unsealed bike path?
I don't have handy like the sort of annual cost of maintaining a unsealed path as opposed to concrete. Concrete paths have very little maintenance, especially where there's no tree roots or things like that that will create lips and things that need to be fixed in the future. Concrete itself, when it doesn't have exposure to any of those issues, does have a very long life. Unsealed will, from time to time need to be patched up and more metal laid, but that is a relatively cheap operation, and because it's only being driven on by bicycles or people, occasional horse, it's not going to be exposed to the same type of damage that an unsealed road would be. I suppose one issue that is a little bit outside of anyone's control is the weather impacts. So an unsealed surface is a lot more susceptible to scouring and things like that in the rain. But, you know, we have a number of unsealed paths, like parts of the Ohope Hill, the one along Ferry Road, the one that's being constructed in Edgecombe. So, you know, we do have a number of them there, and they don't require huge amounts of maintenance, but certainly is more than our concrete ones.
Can I just ask a question? Assuming that there were more development out in the coastlands area, is it possible to fund such a thing from development contributions for any new houses that are plonked out there? Is that something that's viable? Which it is, okay.
Yes, so so as a little bit of background to the shared use path, originally it was in one of the previous LTPs, I think about 2018, but then that was when the boat harbour proposal came about, and so rather than trying to upgrade a path in isolation from that project, it was brought into the wider Kepa Road improvement project. And then now with the recent NZTA, the fact that we didn't get any subsidy for the implementation of the Kepa Road project, it came out through those discussions was actually, can we look at separating the path itself back out from that main project and see whether it's viable to go ahead with that path. But certainly, if it wasn't done now, or even, you know, the local share could potentially come from development contributions, and certainly in the future that is available because it's related to improving something related to growth.
Oh, thank you for that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Good morning, Lise. Thanks for some of those explanations, because I had a few little pop questions there as well. I see the recommendation is to do nothing at this time based on perhaps what might be happening with the boat harbour. Just like the development contributions, could the Harbour Trust Board pay for their length of the road?
I'm not
All of it.
sure if I'm the best.
Sorry, you're
person
asking
to
whether
answer
the,
that.
the board
Well, you know,
could pay
the boat harbour
Project.
Yeah,
project,
Could the project
can't they fund their part of the development?
well, it hasn't been imposed as a condition on the consent. So essentially that opportunity's been lost, if you like, in the sense of asking for it. It needs to be a condition of consent to be able to enforce it.
If we do, supplementary, if we do nothing though, will they come and say we need this improved or that improved, like driveways, entranceways?
Well, they'll have to provide their own driveways and entranceways.
And so the wider Kepa Road path project, we currently have on hold awaiting further direction on what is happening with the boat harbour. So the Kepa Road path is included in that wider Kepa Road project. So once we've got that understanding of the direction for the boat harbour project, then we can reconsider what will happen to the Kepa Road project, and that's where there'd be a further discussion with council about that wider project, and one option could be to only do the path rather than the road, or different options.
Thank you.
Councillor James and then Councillor Boynton, did you?
Yeah, I'm tending to agree with the Mayor here, and I don't know about not doing anything with that cycleway and that, but we could do some minimal work. I mean, I've never used it, but my observation when I've been driving to and from coastlands is we're actually getting quite a few cyclists and that starting to use parts of the road because of the state of the cycle tracks. To me, I can't see why we couldn't just, particularly down around the boat harbour, I mean, that's a project that could be years away yet before anything happens there, so why can't we just patch that up so how it is a suitable, well, it'll get us by anyway under the current rates and that. I mean, we're trying to cut costs and we don't want to be putting new parts in. I think long term, the full time, a full cycleway right out to coastlands, it's inevitable because that area is growing all the time as well. So it will come, but I think right now, if we could just patch up the worst parts of it and at least keep cycles on cycleway, that's a good step forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien.
I support the recommendation. They're not doing nothing. They're reacting to the reactive maintenance. And as they say, renewal as per all other district footpaths and cycle paths. So I support the recommendation. Simple.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor, if everyone could just express where they're sitting on that, we'll just go.
Yep, I'm happy with the recommendation. It makes sense. I don't think it makes any sense to replace it with it is currently a concrete path. It doesn't make any sense to rip it up to make it an unsealed path. That, to me, that's actually going backwards because it's currently is a concrete path. It may not be the greatest. I do ride it often on my bicycle, so I don't think it's that bad to ride. I certainly haven't got any issues, and it just makes sense with what's planned in the future, so I think I'm happy with the staff recommendation. But patch up, if it's, needs an essential patch up somewhere, you do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, we're trying to save costs, as Councillor James has said, at some stage there needs to be needs to be properly done, but at the moment that's not, we're trying to shave costs. The only question I had was in terms of the question of the worst areas. So under the idea of only doing reactive maintenance, will that resolve some of those worst issues that are there now? Because it is well used and we do regularly get a lot of complaints about it. So
yes, so the reactive maintenance would target some of those worse areas. Whether it would cover all the areas that everyone would want fixed is, it's a bit of a subjective thing. Just as a little bit of background too, we, in terms of all our footpaths and cycle paths, we run a 3-yearly survey which details the condition of all our footpaths to the extent of measuring lips, because there's such a small tolerance for when there's bumps and things in the footpath that can cause issues with people falling over. So we collect that information right across our footpath and shared use path network, and that identifies different faults from a grade 1 where it's in fabulous condition to a grade 5 where it's in really poor, and then we prioritise the maintenance or renewal of those repairs. So the recommended staff option is saying to treat this shared use path the same as we do all the other paths. So we'd still go through that process of undertaking those prioritised repairs, but we'd be looking at the Kepa Road shared use path in the same lens as all the other ones, because if we were to just target maintenance there's a number of other footpaths and cycle paths across our wider network that would then miss out.
So can I just ask a supplementary? So, that sounds great. Presumably when you do that evaluation, you're also looking at things like the amount of use and those kind of, so there's a whole range of criteria you'd kind of sum up.
Yes, so the fault grading is based on the extent of the damage fault, but then the prioritisation and the program development is based on some of those other factors. Like a road that serves more vehicles is going to need a higher level of service and intervention than a low volume. The footpaths and shared use paths are treated in the same way.
Thank you. Great.
So I'm all for the staff recommendation. I know that 2 years ago we had in the budget we were going to do a $450,000 path in Te Teko down past all the marae so the folk could get there in their mobility scooters and not when we wiped that out, because it increased 1.5, and I went back to the Residents Association Te Teko, they were disappointed, but they said we understand. And they all said, yeah, rate's too high now, let's chop it. So I think that the same needs to apply for this one. I mean, we don't even maintain the path that's there now at Te Teko, but I agree with staff. Let's do the basic maintenance, make sure no one hurts themselves, and let's try and keep things to a minimum. Thank you.
Councillor Pulley, you want it turned into a concrete highway with lane markings and whatnot? Okay, thank you. Next.
Yes, I'd like to say that I support the staff's recommendation as well. And also too, just listening to our staff in regards to what may happen with the road and the widening of the road and whether or not that impacts on that, and just looking at, you know, we don't really want to put a large investment in something that might end up changing later on, but also too glad to know that the repairs and that will be done, and ensuring that we do keep it safe for whānau. Kia ora.
Yeah, I support the recommendation, but I'd also like to add some comments. So there is a very enthusiastic group of people that cycle from coastlands to the heads every day. And when I'm down walking my dog, they stop me regularly, which I encourage, very happy to hear about it. The lament is not the repairs, it's the quality of the repair work. And so they get a little bit excited about, yes, we're going to do some fix-ups, but they would challenge who was watching the contractors delivering the quality of work. So I'd just like us to be very cautious about that. They probably weren't going to be happy that we're not going to seal it, because they have been waiting for a very long time. But to get their agreement, we just have to make sure the quality of the repair fits in really well. Thanks.
Well, I've given my views, but when I was riding that path all the time, I asked for the potholes to be fixed. But if I had have known that I needed to ask for reactive maintenance, then maybe that would have happened. But let's just do some reactive maintenance on it, not just say that we're going to do it. And I do agree with what the Deputy Mayor said, that when they finally did throw some tar seal in some of those potholes, they don't even think they banged it down. So, yeah. But, yep, you've got your answer. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mayor and councillors. It's really helpful. I appreciate we went a bit more into the detail there, but so we'll leave it unbudgeted for the draft budget. On that note, that's the end of the variation as such, the changes, but we will go through now the role and the FTE, and I'll hand over to Emmeline next to me.
Thanks, Harvey. We wanted to have a discussion around some of the context around FTEs in the organisation, some of the background, some of the, I guess, context floating around at the moment, and then at the end we'll just propose an option for the annual plan starting 1 July this year. Yeah, that's a little bit of a purpose statement around what we want to go through today. I'm happy to take questions as we go through. So we've got 4 things to cover. One of them is around FTE growth across the sector, roughly around the last 5 to 10 years. Then we'll just touch on some of the specific drivers for growth at Council, at Whakatane District Council, the impact of some of those increases, and then we'll talk about roles in the long-term plan, and as I said, an option for the annual plan starting 1 July. So sector-wide, just some of the trends and the changes that we've seen and how we've responded to it. We've talked about this in the past, some of the changes around health and safety legislation, building compliance. This meant that we've had to increase staffing. Technology and cybersecurity, I mean, I'm sure we all remember even 10 years ago, the IT department tended to have 3 people that didn't speak to anyone. And now we've got, like, because of technology changes, cybersecurity, shift into the cloud. And I know I've mentioned to you that there was this myth a long time ago that there'd be kind of channel migration, that would all shift to a different thing, but actually we've just found channel duplication. We're just running more suites, more services, more platforms, and certainly technology is a huge part of what we do now. If you go through our annual plan, pretty much every single budget line has got a technology component. We just wanted to touch on some of that things, some of the issues around service delivery. In a lot of what we do now, we've changed from a regulator to a partner. People, you know, a lot of what we do, people want to see us part of the discussions early on. They want to partner with us. Sometimes that's our funding. Sometimes it's just advice. Even this morning with that diversity, equity, inclusion, a lot of the community partnership work is, we're not doing the work. We're just sitting alongside people who actually do the work and deliver things for our communities. And again, a lot more engagement. I think we saw with the long-term plan, you know, that was actually us alongside you out in the community having thousands of conversations with our stakeholders, with our partners, and with community members. There's also what we've seen is, and we'll probably see that through the ratepayer survey that comes back through to you regularly. There's an expectation around things like services and things like events. People want to live in a place where there are things going on, and council is usually a partner in those. So again, sometimes we're funding them, sometimes we're just making those events happen. But it all has an impact on staffing. We talked about this, and the Mayor's talked about this this morning, those central government policy changes, and just recently we've seen Three Waters reform, local government reform, and the impact that has on staffing. It's providing you with advice, it's responded to submissions. It all takes time. I've touched on the comms there. That's just an example of how the sector's responded to those changes in that particular field. It all has an impact on staff and on budgets. The last one I just want to touch on, what amazes me about local government in New Zealand is it's amazing how different all the councils are when we're all doing the same thing. There's no two councils the same. You can review, even how we demonstrate our financial information, everyone's different. Everyone does things in a different way. We've all got different systems running. And I'm sure David will touch on even some of the detailed discussions now around local water done well. When you start talking to councils, like how do you actually operate, we're all completely different. And of course, we're all different shapes and sizes as well. We're a very big district with a low population. So for example, when you talk to the transport team about going out and reviewing the network, it might take one staff member a week to actually drive the network. In Kawerau, it might take them an hour. And that all has impacts on FTs.
You mentioned the imposition by government on us of responding to all of this whiplashing from one. You get one government, they come in and turn everything around, then the other guys put it all, and we have to respond to that. Has anyone quantified exactly how much human resources used, jumping around at government's policy whims as they go from one thing to another? Because maybe we should say to them, well, you're costing us 10% of our human resource, so why don't you chip in 10%? Or something like that. But if we don't even know how much it is as of the total, we can hardly say much.
I think LGNZ have done some work in the past on that, but Steve?
Yeah, I'm not really too sure either. I know some work has been done, but it goes back to your point, all councils are very different, and local government stuff, other central government stuff probably affects them in different ways. But what I do know is every year in an annual plan, there is a various percent, might be just under or just over 1%, has got something to do with central government, new compliance, new requirements, whatever it is, new costs. Every year in an annual plan, there are new central government compliance things. But in terms of how much staff it takes up, not too sure.
So when staff get involved in projects, I'm not sure how you work at that level of, do they bill to a particular bucket, or how does it, because you might already have therefore some accounting means of tracking or not?
We do with some project works, for example, the Better Off funding. Staff working on that will allocate their time towards that Better Off funding. But for example, the submission of the Treaty Principles Bill, we wouldn't bill towards that, as an example.
Right, so we're not capturing it.
No, we don't.
No, because when you look at the submissions, say for the 3 water bills or whatever, there's a lot of work in there.
Yep.
Most of us normal folk don't have time to get in and read the 900 something pages of RMA legislation and figure out what it means. That would take weeks and weeks. So I just imagine it's a huge amount of work. And we really should be capturing it, because if we can't even say how much work it is, then how can we go and hit them with the bill?
We treat it as BAU, really, don't we, that sort of stuff, but we'd probably need another FTE or two to go through the process of measuring how much time we spend.
Usually we're trying to build the plane as we're taking
Well,
off.
at the moment we can't even say how many FTE, what proportion of an FTE is being used for that.
On the big projects,
can I ask that we do it?
We do allocate portions of people onto some of the, and I have people in my team who have come from a billing by the minute background, and I've also done that myself in the tertiary education sector. And I would say it's as Steve points out, so much is BAU, but that is constantly shifting because things do come from all sides. And my personal experience is the time and energy required to track how you're spending your time doesn't justify the quality and the validity of the data that you would get.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what machinery we already have in place. Because I thought if it was already there, that's fine, but...
The investment council's making in the ERP and also the enterprise program management, systems and people. The intention there is that as they progress, what we'd like to see is being able to capture that sort of information, because it's also very good management information, but it is very hard to capture it without a good technology system, because doing it manually can be quite time intensive. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to draw your attention to, and there's lots of kind of metrics when you get to salary costs and salary size and the organisation. What I just want to demonstrate here is, give or take, our FTE cost in relation to our total OPEX spend has remained around 24 to 26% over that 10-year period. As our business has grown, proportionally the spend on FTEs hasn't. It's remained roughly the same. You usually get some peaks around LTP years where you kind of play a bit of catch-up. But I mean, aside from the 2019 year, where it went up to 20% of our OPEX spend, we're reasonably consistent in that area. I did a bit of a... with Kelly from Finance, which I just had a quick look last week at the long-term plan for our WIPE for Western Bay and for Taupo. Western Bay just slightly above us and Taupo just slightly below us. So I haven't done any other councils, but all of them around that 24 to 26% of total OPEX.
Well, OPEX seems to be the place where we've got some major problems and contributing to our operational deficit. And when on the FTEs, I always express this as a function of revenue. And as a function of revenue, they have gone up a lot. So, that's one way of doing it. Also, our staff numbers were fairly flat from 2010 for 10 years until 2017 or 18. And then they took off, where I don't see that much of a change in the way of conducting business. But can I just inquire as to those blue bars, which are the total OPEX spend? Can we have that? Could I ask to have that graph, but with the various components of OPEX in there? Because I've got no idea what does that cover the contractors, or so that's in the blue bit, is it? And what about other things, like if somebody gets a tractor or a car, we purchase a new car, is that, well, the fuel will be in there, but all of that stuff, I'd like to see what all that looks like, but on that graph. Is that...
You could do, but once you start to chunk down to that level of detail, you'll just have a bunch of different colours and lines in there, and it won't give you the
don't have to be
context.
minute, doesn't have to be minute, granular, it doesn't have to be super granular, but if it it just doesn't really give me a feel.
We can certainly dive into that and provide some more information or breakdown on what total OPEX is. The challenge will be what's critical for the conversation around FTE. And it might be, and it's not going to be looking at things like fuel costs and things like that. It'll probably be looking at things like use of consultants or that sort of stuff, because your normal operations of the business will include interest and depreciation and things like that in there as well. So if you want some granularity in it, we've got to identify what it is we want to look at, and then what its relation to FTE is, so that we can use it for a decision making. The other thing you talked about was revenue. So if you're following a balanced budget model, your revenue should be equaling your operational expenditure. So you're not making a profit. So in that regard, total OPEX is basically the same as revenue.
Yeah, but our revenue's not equaling our expenditure, which is why we've got a deficit that we're
Correct.
struggling to pay off. And I would say that if you knew what your revenue was, there should be really no need for a deficit, right?
Yeah,
Because
and I
if you're
think
spending within your means or you're cutting your coat according to your cloth.
the deficit started around 2024, so the bulk of that graph is still relevant.
Thanks, Madam.
Any questions? None?
So just some information around council, and you'll be familiar with this. We've talked about this through the long-term plan. Just some of the things we've seen: open spaces in-house. A lot of our transport function has been brought in-house. There's obviously a cost saving to that rather than using externals. Emergency management, we've established a team. You'll see them. Justin's just across the way. They're inducting all our new starters around basics of emergency management. Māori Partnerships team, we've seen some growth and establishing the team as well, in fact. Some functions within council that were absent or under-resourced, and they were identified as part of that health check 2020, things like all performance reporting. I remember a line from that health check report actually said at the time the council didn't really have a functional HR department. Project management, a lot more work around risk and risk management, procurement and asset management we've seen increase. I have to say, I'll touch on this in a moment actually, some of these projects, it talks to what we were saying earlier on, when you have something like Better Off funding, it might not be an FTE, but actually it might take someone 10% of their week, and then suddenly they're also looking at future-proof, and that's another 10%, and then there might be a bit of boat harbour, and that's another 5%. And incrementally, what we've seen with some of our project work, and some of the stuff that we brought in-house, and our BAU, it over 2 or 3 years adds up to a person. So it just all chips away, and it's just impacted on that FTE growth.
You talk about genuine and authentic Maori engagement. What do you mean by that? I mean, have we not got that, or is how do you define that? I mean, you've used it here.
We have now. It probably speaks to what I was saying earlier on about becoming a partner. So rather than in the past, and probably Michelle would add to this, probably I've seen other organisations, and sometimes our iwi partners are on a mailing list, and they get an email saying, "What do you think about this?" We might consult with them when we want to hear what people have got to say. But actually, it's sitting alongside people over a long, long period of time, and making decisions together, and that's what we've started to see. And that takes resource, and that takes time.
Yeah, I guess I've been married for 30 years and I'm still not sure if I've got a genuine and authentic relationship. But anyway.
I'd reach out and ask them.
And I can tell you what they'll say.
Maybe put them on a mailing list, Victor. Yeah. Some of the impact of that. So, we're actively, genuinely engaged with our communities. The organisation is the most diverse we've ever been. iwi relationships we continue to strengthen them. As I said, emergency management just across the way here is resourced. Project management functions coming along, and things like procurement and risk is in place. And I know some of you councillors have expressed certainly the quality of the information that came through the long-term plan, the quality of the reporting's improved, particularly around those organisation metrics, and it's helping you make better decisions. So you'll remember this as we went through the long-term plan. So this is the current, the last year, the current year, and next year, the first 3 years of the long-term plan. And there were some of the roles that were agreed upon, and the impact of that across the organisation. You'll see there on the bottom right, that were the totals for year 1, 2, and 3. So the option that we wanted to talk about today was year ones that we're currently in. What we're proposing is year 2 is we reduce that figure to 0, and that's for the 1 July year starting. Some of those roles will be pushed out to year 3, but actually we'll talk about that in the following annual plan. And it may well be that we'll go through a similar process. At this time, the exec and our managers have talked about this at length. We don't believe that there'll be material difference to level of service. It might well be as we go through the year that some roles are identified, and we've got some new GMs in place, and there may well be actually as part of that review with a new GM in place that will establish that we will require some additional roles, but we'd like to start the year on the basis that there'll be no additional.
Councillor Jukes?
Excuse me, brain's not quite working properly, but overall it's extra. Just not in year 2, but overall it's more than what we've currently proposed at 10.75, 16.25 and 5.
It's up to 32, and that's adding up to 26.
So it's gone down.
So we've pulled it down by 6.
Perfect.
We've also taken one off the FTE, which is not included in that mix. Yep.
Sorry, I said up, I meant to say down.
Okay, cool.
And you picked me up earlier.
I know. Yes, but I've got an excuse.
I've got a sore foot.
I meant to say down. Excellent.
So I think we'd be keen to hear a few thoughts around the table on this proposal.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments, but I think maybe let the conversation go first because you might cover off.
I think Councillor Jukes has already expressed her views. Did you? You said good.
Yes, overall it's good. I mean, it is going up 2.25 in the first year one. It's higher from year 1, but I think any savings has got to be good, so I'm happy with that.
Councillor O'Brien?
So there's like something like 7 F's been taken. And
Yes, including the one at the executive level, which doesn't appear here.
Right, yeah. So digital services, finance, transport and waste management are where they've come out of. And you think that this won't affect levels of service?
We don't believe it will. There's some things that we're delaying, and actually, for example, in the digital services space, we've seen some changes in there, so we're actually just going to see how that plays out. And we've got like the ERP project. We're just going to get a closer look at what exactly that means and not react to it before we actually have all the information here.
Yeah, okay.
Our hope is that when we bring the report to adopt the budget in March, that we'll be able to give you a little bit more clarity on any impacts on the work programme, but we feel confident that by pausing or rephasing some of the projects, particularly over the next financial year, that it won't affect the level of service.
Well, I think if you can trim that much out of the projected increase, that's fantastic. And yeah, we can monitor as we go, and if we see impacts, then we can revisit. Yeah. No, that's fantastic work. That's awesome.
Gavin?
Could you just explain these 2 graphs for me, please? So in the orange one, we were going to have, with this year and next year combined, would be 21.25 more FTEs, right? Now, if you go to the blue graph, over this year and next year, which there is none this year, it's going to go down to 13. So that's minus 7.25.
The 2 graphs. The 2 tables present the information from different lenses. So first of all, the orange graph, don't know if you remember, but the previous CFO during the LTP was taking it very much from a finance lens, so sort of scoring them by when they start. So 0.5 would mean that they would start on 1 January, 1 meant that they started on 1 July. But actually, if you go through the total number that have started in year 1, it comes to 13. If you went through all the 0.5s and the 1 on the orange, it actually adds up to 13. So this is actually just trying to simplify it and say over the course of a year, how many FTE have started. We've actually recruited 13 people in year 1, which is what we said we'd do in the LTP. We're proposing in year 2, 0 new FTE, and we've pushed a number of them into year 3. So year 3 has increased from around 5 to up to 13. What that does is, first of all, I mean, we've talked about it as an executive team. The people we've recruited and the work we need to do in terms of embedding those people and some of the projects that they need to do is probably enough work for us to manage in year 2. So that's a period of consolidation, we're calling it. And then in year 3, following the election and the annual plan next year, councillors can come back to the 13 and we can have a discussion about actually, are there some gaps in the level of service we really want to fill? Are we hearing some noise in some particular areas, particularly those areas where we need to fill those FTE? Or can we make some decisions about trimming it even further? So it gives us a little bit of a safety net. So yeah, I just wanted to provide that little bit of clarification.
Can we go back and actually tell me how many less, what we were planning for year 2 and year 3, how many less are we planning for now?
Over the course of the LTP, so 3 years, we were budgeting for 32, where we are now down at 26.
Thank you.
John?
Andrew.
Oh,
Councillor Riles.
Councillor Riles. Yeah, but Councillor Puller want to say something? No, okay, all right, fair enough. You don't have to say anything.
I missed out on a bit of this work while I was out of the room, but just looking at the transport, where we've got, year 1 we had 3 in transport, but we also had, wasn't there some cross-department support with the reduction of subsidies from Wakahitahi that becoming available, that some of that team could help in the Three Waters space? And just looking at, for year 3, there's still 1 included and 2 for the Three Waters in year 3 of the LTP.
I can probably answer the first question, and the answer is yes. So we've utilised some of our project management expertise within the transport team to support other teams. And for example, Hardis is providing support to the flood wall integration project at the moment as well. David might be able to talk to the FTE plan for year 3.
Thank you.
Yes, in terms of transport, I think because again of the reduced program as it is, I think the focus is we'd like to direct that team towards more and support in terms of additional FTE is in terms of asset management and transport planning. The offset of that is against consultant costs that we're currently incurring. So there's essentially no cost, and we may actually look to do that within this year's FTE complement because there's some vacancies. In terms of moving forward, in terms of network maintenance and the like, I think we're just in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment. So I think, yes, we've got a placeholder in there for year 3, but let's just see where we get to over the next year in funding discussions.
Thank you. Supplementary, if I may. David, you just touched on another point, and I'm not sure whether it's highlighted later on in the report, the consultants that we are having to use because of our lower than budget numbers for FTEs. Does that number go up?
No, not in terms of transport and others. I think we're just currently, we rely on a lot of consultancy support already.
Okay, sorry, perhaps I should have directed to Steve. Across the whole of council, does consultant fees go up as a result?
I don't think so. I think it would probably remain the same. Yeah, as it has been. I might make a comment at the end that comes back to that, if that's all right.
We've been spending somewhere in the vicinity of $5 to $7 million a year on consultants. Consistently for the last 10 years.
It's normal. It's normal. But I'll come back to that.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. Thank you for your mahi. I do support what the staff have put forward and just want to mahi to the mahi that's been done to reduce that. We have been asking about this for some times to get clarity on the FTEs. That's what you've provided. We've also asked how and where can we reduce those numbers, and how it equates to the costs and any cost savings that we can make, and that's what you've provided. So thank you for that. I also wanted to touch on that there is a infometrics report that Local Government New Zealand did put out regarding the increase to local government and making an analysis of the different sectors as well as looking at the increased labour costs. Not necessarily focusing on FTEs maybe, but looking at the wider aspects which you have identified, depending on the current government, depending on their policy shift and moves, that there is generally an increase or uptake of those roles that need to be either created or filled in. And that's what you've identified in here, so thank you for doing that. I also want to touch on the Māori partnerships and the establishing of the relationship there, and how important it is to be able to have staff within council that are able to ensure that that relationship is genuine and that you have people who have a strong understanding of Te Ao Māori, interacting with our wider Māori community and also our iwi and hapu. I think also too, one of the other significant changes is the introduction of Māori boards. Because if we are having Māori board councillors around the table, being able to ensure that we have staff who are able to disseminate or translate, either literally through language or translate through the understanding of the values and thoughts that are being put forward, it ensures that that part of the decision making is actually turned into action on the ground within our staff, and it is understood, it is comprehended, and it is able to be represented well in our mahi. And even though I may say you can't necessarily put a value on that, one of the things I may want to put a value on is that to my understanding, we currently do not have litigation cases from our iwi against us. Is that correct?
I know that Paul Warbrick had made that statement previously, and I haven't heard anything to change that.
Yeah.
Michelle's on the line now. Michelle might know.
Oh, can you see me? Kia ora koutou. Yeah, we don't have any legal proceedings with iwi or hapu.
And can I just ask Michelle, mahi to you, do we have any idea of how much previously we were in litigation with, or that the council were paying in litigation in previous cases before we established these teams and also Māori wards?
I don't have that information. Unfortunately, that was before my. Fortunately, that was before my time. But I'm sure we could pull that information from somewhere.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to highlight that even though there's an investment or increase in the Māori sector, I guess, investment in council and the relationships, that I would believe has also meant cost savings. So it's. Yeah, but I just wanted to mahi and highlight those points. Thank you.
Thanks, and thank you very much, Steve, and to the GMs and the teams for reviewing that. because I know it's been a bit of an angst for the councillors and yourself, so well done. I only had a question about finance. So in the orange section, finance was going to have 2 extra support people in the first 2 years, and now there's only 1 in the 3rd year. Is that, I guess you must have agreed to it, Bevan, but do you need any more support?
I think the roles that we've identified in the revised budget will be sufficient. There's a fair bit of stuff going on with ERP replacement and things like that, and so some of the roles that I think were previously put up were around streamlining processes and looking at systems and things like that. So I think an element of that will be captured via the ERP. There was also a bunch of roles that were getting taken out because I think previously there was supposed to be some savings that were created. So that all needs to be reviewed and reshaped. And I think the ERP will be a good trigger to start looking at those kind of processes and what resources we need.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor James. No.
I didn't know I had my hand up, but,
Oh, okay, then that's all right, thanks. Oh, you've got your hand up?
oh, well, I have now, but,
And now you have it.
yeah, I'm just happy to go with what everyone's sort of saying.
All right.
You've caught me on the hop a bit here, so give me a bit of time.
Okay. That leaves me. Oh, no, hang on, he's got his hand back up.
No, he hasn't.
Oh, no, he hasn't.
I did have one question, which was around, there was some discussion in the transport team about bringing in more kind of, bringing capacity internally, and I think most of the recruitment's already been done in the transport, so that's already kind of taken place?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to before. Yeah, it may well happen this financial year in terms of bringing in some capacity to help with our future planning, if you like, forward planning program, and it'll be an offset against what we currently are spending essentially on consultancies to help do that at a much cheaper rate.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Sorry, I've probably lapsed attention when you were talking. The other question, I brought it up the other day, I think, was around how we track those savings, because I think those are quite important to be able to demonstrate to the community. If we could, quite difficult, I imagine. Are we able to do a better job at that?
Yeah, so just before I came into the meeting, I was with Annie talking to this exact point.
Right.
So yeah, I've asked her to try and put some numbers around it.
Yeah.
And I think, Bevan, you'd done some work prior to the LTP around it as well. So,
Right.
yep, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, at the start of the LTP process, my wish was for 0 FTE and do more with less. Times are tough. We ended up with 32. We've got down to 26. So that's pretty good. We're travelling in the right direction, and without sacrificing without any loss of service. So I applaud you for that, and our new CEO, because the previous LTP was developed under another CEO. So I'm really glad to see that we've got knocked off 7, and that we've added none in year 2, which means that it's probably going to be a good call, I think. Of course, my starting negotiating position was didn't hold, but I'm glad to see that we're reducing. I have a problem with the way that we define or roles. In my previous jobs, if you needed a new person as a manager of a project or whatever, you would have to write a detailed proposal and business case and all this sort of carry on. Here we're very, I don't think you need 6 more people in this area, and, what are they really going to do? Are they really needed? The call is kind of left up to you guys. You give us a couple of lines in a document and a bit of a spiel. For me, that's all a bit loose, and I think could be done a lot better. At least that's my personal view anyway. But yeah, I'm glad to see us actually reduce the numbers, and I take my hat off to Steve and the team for that. And Steve wants to summarise a bit.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, actually. Councillors, we're still just a little bit uncertain about the FTE picture at the end of the long-term plan. And, we certainly heard that going through November and into December. I want to acknowledge Emlyn for leading this piece of work in terms of pulling together a bit of a background around what are some of the drivers to FTE decisions for councils, and also the rest of the team that's been supporting him in this process. As he's been going through it, and the annual plan's been happening at the same time, it has required us as an ELT to have a fresh look at the numbers and some of the drivers. So those conversations did converge. But I think it was really helpful just going through some of those drivers over the last 3-5 years that have driven the need for FTEs in all councils around New Zealand. And I'm sure if you sort of sit back and have a look at, when the FTE requests come up, and you sort of have a look at some of those drivers, you can sort of go, yeah, actually I'm starting to see a few lines there. So it was really helpful to see that. I thought it was very useful to have, it's a rough metric, it's not a perfect science, but using FTE to OPEX. I mean, what you're sort of saying there is if you've got a particular work program, then you're going to need a particular number of staff to deliver that work program. And we're sort of sitting in around, I think it was 22 to 24 or 25%. And the team also just had a look at a couple of other councils, and that kind of feels about right. And to me, that always sort of felt about right. I thought it was around a quarter, so it was a little bit less than what I thought it would be. But I think it's a useful metric, and it's something that we might keep an eye on in the future in terms of trying to manage that balance. I'll just talk a little bit about revenue to FTE. I think sometimes that could provide a distorted picture, and I think people sort of briefly mentioned that actually currently our revenue is below what it should be, so you'd get a distorted picture of the number of FTE to revenue. As an extreme case, you might have zero revenue but a $1 billion work program. That would suggest that you've got a very distorted picture of your FTE to revenue. But I think actually Bevan made the point in councils, we are non-profits, so our revenue should equal our OPEX. That's where we're aiming for, and revenue and OPEX should be the same thing. So I think using OPEX in this particular case at the moment was probably a good idea. So I did support that when it came through the ELT as well. And then at the end of it, we just went through what we are proposing, and I guess, sort of what we talked about as an ELT, I sort of covered off. We've got enough FTE and enough work program to go through a period of consolidation in year 2. We had a very considered conversation about impacts on levels of service. I'm suspecting somewhere later on in the presentation we talk a little bit about where we're just going to keep an eye on things, but I mean you can sort of see it here anyway, but we are very conscious about that and what a period of consolidation might look like in terms of level of service. Also proposing that in year 3, yep, we've got 13 FTE. It is a bit of a safety net. So it's in the budget. It's always been in the budget. In fact, it's a little bit lower than what the 3-year budget was, but it is a safety net for the council after the election to come back into the annual plan and have a consider about what its needs might be. So I'm quite happy about where that landed. Just on consultancy, I mean, I was reflecting on the conversation a couple of years ago. It might have been before the last election. where councillors went through in detail our consultancy list. I remember it was while this building was being refurbed and we were in the regional council chambers and put up the full list. And actually when councillors went through that list, actually you couldn't find anything that was unreasonable in that list. And I do remember, though, probably most of the conversation was Councillor Dennis was picking up one particular nuance around, I think it was a footpath renewal in Matatara, and we spent a bit of time talking about that. But aside from that, when you look at the list, it's pretty reasonable. And that's because consultancy is largely related to the projects we're delivering. And all councils have a certain threshold or a level of consultancy they require because, one, it's an additional piece of work that maybe we don't have the FTE to deliver, but mostly it's because we don't have the technical expertise in-house to do that particular type of work consultancy might be needed for. I'm thinking about at the moment, we're out to tender for a consultancy firm to do an assessment of, or a business case, well, a feasibility for a solar type thing out by the airport. You know, we don't have any solar expertise in-house, so we have to go out for a consultancy, and that's part of our work program, and that's where we bring in expertise to support a work program. Most of the consultancy actually sits with Transport and Waters because they need geotech experts, they need roading experts and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's always going to be an element of consultancy, and I think the fact that actually the consultancy budget, I don't know the numbers perfectly, but we haven't seen any spikes or shifts in that, so it's sort of largely sitting the same. And to answer your question again, I think what we could expect next year, because we're in the same level of service in terms of BAU and the projects we're delivering, that our consultancy requirements will just be similar. But, you know, something we can keep an eye on and we should probably check from time to time. There are quite a few uncertainty. Well, there's one big uncertainty we have in front of us when we talk about FTE as a team is what's going to happen with waters. So we feel like we may have plateaued with our FTE. We've probably got it to where we need to for a while, but actually we have got some big uncertainties around what's going to happen with Three Waters and then what impact, because Three Waters is not just a standalone team. You'll remember last time when we went through this process, it has wider impacts because Three Waters requires comms, it requires finance, it requires IT. So it actually, if you end up going through, government ends up sort of directing us towards multi-council CEOs, community sort of sees some benefit in that, council makes that decision, then actually if you were to move waters out, it actually has quite a big impact to FTE on our council. So that is floating around in our head, and in some ways too, having year two, no new FTE, a period of consolidation, let's get some stuff finished, then we can also deal with local waters done well, because council will be making decisions towards September, and then we're right into implementation next year. So I just sort of wanted to summarise all of that stuff up, bringing it together. Really appreciate the comments, and I think we have spent a lot of time talking about how we can get the number down. I suppose 32 to 26 doesn't sound huge, plus one out of the FTE. So we're 7 down, but actually we've only appointed 13 out of 32, and all the rest is on hold.
It's it's a good start, Steve. We can keep going down further.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
On waters, I think that there is a lot of uncertainty. We've had the water regulations for drinking water issued, and they've not really changed in any substantial way in terms of. But we haven't seen wastewater and stormwater. But in all of the communications we've had from this government so far, the signals they're giving is that they understand the link between where they put that regulatory bar and how much it's going to cost council. So on the one hand, they say they want rates kept affordable, and on the other hand, if that's sort of, those two things are in tension, but if they keep on saying that they understand, and we've had it from DIA just recently, so hopefully there won't be too many dramatic changes as was the case for drinking waters, and you can go through all of the 100 and something things you have to measure, and you'll see that they haven't changed for drinking water standards. So the wastewater standards is yet to be seen, but we're supposed to be getting them at the end of February.
End of this month.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then we'll have more certainty then. So
Let's hope so. Let's get into the budget, because we've actually got still quite a bit to go, and I don't want to sort of start falling asleep before lunch. Thank you.
Thanks, Lenny. So we'll move to the budget sections, and then we'll discuss consultation. So what does the number look like with what you've seen before? So as we said, the LTP was forecasting an average of 12.7% rates increase. And now this annual plan budget, with the slides you've seen before, is looking at an average of 10.5%. With this budget, we are managing to reduce the forecast rates increase a little bit, and also to apply some of the savings to reduce the annual operating deficit. As we've mentioned, as some of the GMs have mentioned already, we will be monitoring the impact in terms of level of service and associated risks. Before I hand over to Bevan to go through some important information, did you want to add anything, Lenny? No? All right. So I'll just hand over to Bevan to go through the next slides.
So if we move on, can I just ask one question? And I meant to bring this up when we were talking about the FTEs, but it's got possible areas of highest risk our community, include community regulation, compliance. The numbers of FTEs are the same, but that worries me because that's an area we get quite a lot of criticism on. So why is that?
Yeah, so this is the team that's currently just under 2 FTEs that do parking enforcement and bylaws enforcement. The intention was over time and over the period of this LTP was to develop that into more of a compliance team for the council as a whole. So at the moment, that particular team are doing particular bylaws enforcement work. Other officers across other activities are doing other enforcement work. The risk is the skill levels across different activities in that area are different and quite different. So it was about trying to centralise it into, have one uniform team, one consistent approach. So essentially what we're saying here is, we are deferring that for another year and we'll review it in year 3. I was thinking of something else. Okay.
Yep, carry on.
And before I jump off this slide, the 10.51% is kind of where we've got to now. The second point under there that says apply some savings to reducing the annual operating deficit, we haven't applied that yet. So what this is giving you is the raw number, and you can choose whether you want to apply any of that between the 10.5 and the 12.7. So we'll seek a bit of clarity on that shortly. So we discussed the funding, the gap loans a bit earlier. So in the LTP, we identified an operating deficit that was about 14 or 15 million in year 1. We consulted with the community about how quickly we'd like to get back to great break even, and 6 years was the preferred option. So that equaled a deficit of about 50 million that we're proposing to carry. It had a repayment term of 25 years in the LTP and an interest rate of 5%. So in total, that equates to about $88 million of funds that would be required to pay back. The reduction of the term from 25 years down to 10 will save over $24 million in interest costs to the community. So that's 750,000 that we put back in to the budget, where it's at currently with a 10.5%, saves 24 million in the long term. Additionally, we looked at sort of applying cost savings towards reducing the funder gap loans. So this is the bit we want to talk about. So For every $1 million reduction in the Fund the Gap loans over this revised term of 10 years, there's an associated $273,000 in interest saving to the community. So, for example, if we were to reduce the Fund the Gap loans down to 40 instead of being 50 million, that saves the ratepayers 2.7 million in interest costs. So in December, you gave us some direction around splitting savings between rates and a reduction in debt. So I guess now's the opportunity to have that conversation. Do you want to apply, lift the 10.5% a bit closer, or split that gap between 12.7 and 10.5 and apply a bit more to reduce the gap? Any comments, questions?
I'd like to, so I'm just trying to, every million reduction is a 273k saving on interest. In terms of the rates figure that we're looking at, there's a 2.19 savings that have been identified. How does that relate to that figure? So, like if we applied 1% of that rates differential to reducing the
1%'s around 700,000, so it would be a bit lower than the 200. Let's say it's about 200,000 of interest savings.
Right. Okay.
The impact of inflation on the principal, is that's eating it away?
Can you explain?
Well, you've got an inflation rate of what, 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
So that money in real terms, even though you've got to pay back 50 million in real terms, it doesn't buy you 50 million's worth of, you know what I mean? Inflation can help you pay back the debt. Oh, that's...
Yeah, I mean, but so the debt is a result of inflation on OPEX and our ability to rate. So, I mean, there's also inflation factored into the 50 million in terms of the gap. I mean, the biggest thing, and I think we talked about it or highlighted it when we looked at the needs-based asset management plan for Three Waters versus what the LTP did. So pushing the 260 million out to year 10 and onwards had a massive negative impact because of inflation. So, making the savings today or making the harder decisions today, it actually has a greater benefit in the future. So using today's dollars will impact or reduce the $50 million greater than, say, if you reduced it in year 6. If you put the 1% this year, would generate a bigger saving. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I have to think about that one.
Okay.
Well, I'll make an initial comment. I think, there was a interesting article in today's paper from the Whakatane Action Group, and one of the things that they talked about, and they talked about it when they presented here, was the urgency of addressing the operating deficit. And I totally agree. I think it's just such an unsustainable way to run an organisation. So my view would be that we should apply the bulk of that saving to reducing that debt. I do think, I hear the argument that we need to, that it would be good to reduce the, to make the rates increase less than what was projected in the long-term plan. I accept that. And I think bringing the rates increase below 12% would be a good thing to do. But to me, it makes far more financial sense to reduce the debt and create an ongoing benefit for our community. And I think if we take a short-term view and try and just knock these rates down for this year as much as possible, we just leave an ongoing legacy of greater rates burdens in the future. So I think it's far better for our community to use the bulk of that to knock off that that debt that comes out of the operating deficit.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Tantjos, and I'm in full agreement with that. I hear the hurt that people have got going out in the wider community, and they've already had substantial rate increases over the last few years, but I think this is an opportunity to really start picking off that debt, and I don't know where people talk about where the courageous decisions are made, but we've got to be thinking further than this year and next year. And I think this is an opportunity where, because of the current environment with interest rates and inflations, we've got the opportunity to actually reduce it, and I think we should take advantage of it.
Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Worship. I don't quite see it that way. I think, again, the average Joe Bloggs really doesn't consider what our operating deficit is. As I indicated earlier on too, the debt when I came to council was in the single figure millions. It's now in multiples. So I think where the average Joe Bloggs is concerned, it's a rate reduction is what they are seeing to try and ease, as has already been indicated from many councillors this morning. The cost of living is really hurting. Also indicated by a previous councillor about the people that have lost their work, unemployed, can't put food on the table. So I'm sorry, I still come back to the fact that, I'm not being courageous in saying let's reduce our operating deficit in favour of people going without food or being able to put clothes on their kids' backs. So I'm fully supportive that we should put that saving into a rate reduction.
Councillor James.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Tanzos and Deputy Mayor. I take on board what Councillor Isles is saying as well, but I just look at the long term. Our 10-year rating projection. By trying to keep the rates low next year, we're actually pushing the rates up for further years, and we've got no idea on what's ahead of us. No one knows what the economy is going to be like in 2 years, let alone 10 years. So, to me, we've got to be bold and strong and make a stand and set ourselves up for the near to long-term future, not just for the immediate future. Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Dennis.
I've got a bit of a question back on that page 141, where you talk about the LTP approved year 2 was for 12.7% rate rise. You then said the next line there that the proposed rate rise we're coming to now is 10.51, and you said, but that doesn't include the savings. So are you saying it could be lower than that?
No, what I'm saying is we've reduced it down to 10.5 and coming back to you for the direction that you gave us in December. So the direction was that you wanted to apply some of the savings to reducing rates and some of the savings to reducing debt. So now you've got 10.5, so you've got the difference between 12.7 and 10.5 to have that conversation and come up with an agreed level that you'd want to apply to each.
I really believe in reducing debt, and any budget advisor will tell you that the first thing you do is get rid of your credit card debt, and the second most important thing is you try and get rid of all debt, so that out of your surplus you pay down debt. My concern that out there is no surplus for people paying their rates. I heard of a job that was advertised recently, apprenticeship, and one apprenticeship job for electrical apprentice. They had 150 people apply. They had 50 people apply that had already done the pre-employment thing and the advanced pre-employment course, but they also had 20 I think it's 21 applicants from year 3 apprentices who had lost their jobs. 20. That's just in this district. I sometimes don't think that we're really aware of how bad it is out there. And so, like, I really believe in paying down debt, but there is no surplus out of there. So I think we should be putting the decrease down to 10.51 to the people to just help some of them put food on the table, and pay some of their electricity bills, etc., etc.
Anyone else? I mean, I haven't substantially changed my views. We have an operational deficit projected because we are projecting to spend more money than we have. Is that not it in a nutshell? So therefore, don't spend more money than you have. But that's what's projected in the LTP. And we already put this to a vote before Christmas, and we've ended up with a compromise situation. So I'm still in that position because I do know that the tough times are here now for people. Or maybe in the next few years that'll be alleviated and we can change. As you said at the beginning, actually, this is 1 year and next year we can always pivot if we need to. So this is an annual plan, so it's a year by year. And so I'm okay where we landed previously. Councillor Boynton.
Kia ora. Thank you again for your mahi in being able to lay this out a lot more clearly, I think, than we've had before, possibly. So big mahi for that. I mean, I do fully understand about being able to pay off your debts and get rid of it if you have the opportunity to. I think understanding that and being able to communicate that really clearly to our wider whānau and at a public level would be really helpful. Because when people are trying to just barely, get a bread or get a milk or something like that, they're not going to understand, doubling down on deficit or anything else like that. But if there is a way of translating how those savings or that saving, like the example of $2.7 million, equals in terms of a bottle of milk or something, but so that people are able to then, understand what does that mean for me? What does that mean when I need to go to the shop to get my groceries because I have to get my kids' lunches? I know we've said this before, but that's part of the translation of it as well. So I do understand it. Our whānau do understand it, but what they know is what's happening to them right then and now, which is that I can't afford to get a bottle of milk or bread. But if I can see that I'm going to be able to afford that bottle of milk a lot easier in the next couple of years, maybe not, who knows, dreaming, might not be milk anymore. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find a way in which we can communicate this bridge or this other type of gap. I'm still supportive of what we agreed on before, which was, I thought that was a compromise. It was a acknowledgement of what we had heard from our communities, and being able to reduce it by a certain amount, but also to also give half of that or contribution of that towards servicing the debt as well. For me, I found that's a really good balance. And I'm still at that stage. We still have to have this come through to council, but I just wanted to put forward those whakaaro about how do we translate that better around the savings, around the long-term savings, into real everyday terms and images. Thank you.
Councillor Dukes.
thank you. I'll keep it brief. I think it's prudent to reduce the debt because I think there's greater long-term financial benefits in doing that overall for our ratepayers. So I'm happy to support that.
Just another comment about the table that's coming up. Are we up to that yet? Is it all kind of merged?
Yes, because the table reflects the information on the slides that are currently up, so.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we go to the table and you look at Murupara and Te Tiko sitting at 11.7 and 15.5, is there a way we can smooth that out so they're looking between, you know, the 6 and 8%? Because those are vulnerable communities.
Bevan can probably speak to that, but my instinct is it's difficult to do that in the off years because of the policies that we have adopted in the LTP, but you might have a more specific comment.
To be fair, I think we have asked about this before, if there was...
So the biggest impact to those that live in lower value properties in terms of rating is your level of fixed charges versus variable charges. You have some flexibility to move the UAGC, which is the Uniform Annual General Charge that everybody pays. So if you were to lower that, you would have some impacts to all properties. Or if you wanted to target specifically certain areas, you'd need to look at the fixed charges and the activities that we provide to those communities and how they're funded. One of the reasons why we wanted to undertake the review of the Three Waters rating is that all of the stormwater schemes are still funded separately. And you'll see the stormwater rates are quite different across the whole district. And then we've got some other activities that are part funded by target rate and general rate or capital value rate. So the easiest thing would be UAGC changes. More detailed would be looking at the fixed rates for various areas.
Just noting that that would require a consultation process. Yeah, it's quite a significant one as well.
So can I just reiterate what I said, except frame it as a question? If we reduced our projected OPEX spend, we would reduce that debt requirement, right?
We have, by everything that we put up before.
That's what you feel you possibly can?
Yes, I believe so, and that's $24 million
Consistent with what you
savings.
What you think we need and want?
Well, I would say it's what the council wants to deliver.
Yeah, what we think we need and want, yeah.
So it'll be consistent with the long-term plan and the objectives and levels of service you set in the long-term plan.
Yep. And just a reminder too that driving that blue line back on the OPEX graph is mostly inflation. So most of our rates increase for the first 3 years was related to interest rates and inflation.
Yeah, that 10 or 11%. But
so we've been through a process of reducing costs where we can. We can't reduce inflation. We've had some benefits though with reduced interest rates. We've had a go at FTE. We've paused a couple of work programs. The waste stuff doesn't have to happen, and transport, our funding budget there is, so we've reduced where we can.
Sorry. Are we able to get like those reduced figures, like if there was a total in terms of what savings have been done? I know we've seen figures from different parts or departments or mixture of what's saved in the FTEs, but if we're able to get a summary of those categories, but also to a total, because I think that's really important to communicate to our whānau out there. There's a very strong perception, sometimes a bit misguided, that we're just, willy-nilly throwing money all over the place. So it'd be really good just to show how much work has been done by the current council to be able to have those totals, have those categories and have those totals of what reductions or savings have been made or forecasted.
I suspect those are the tables that are in the presentation, the orange ones.
That's
and
the one
blue
that's
ones.
up.
Yeah.
That one that's up now.
Those are
has
the
it
increases
broken
and
down.
decreases.
Oh, those ones. Okay, no, that's cool. Are we able to have it in a narrative form?
Yes, and you will on the 20th of March when we bring it to you to adopt, and there will be a total figure there too.
And if you go back earlier in the presentation, the orange and blue tables, like slide 6, I think it
Yeah,
is, and 7.
yeah. No, that's okay. I just thought because we were having the report given in certain subject titles and stuff like that, it's spread out. So, yeah. So all I'm looking at is like, a catchy paragraph, that says that, oh, look at all the hard mahi that's been done. We've saved this much.
Yeah, and absolutely to your point before around the communication of the story and being as transparent as possible, I think that 24 million of saving of long-term is hugely important because that equates to $1,500 per household.
There you go.
Which is not pocket change.
That's exactly the sentence, to listen to that, to say that there's been $24 million worth of savings that have been worked towards, and that works out to how much?
$1,500 per household.
$1,500 per household. Kia ora, thank you.
Over a number of years, of course, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what we're hearing from the room and what we will go away with, if I'm correct, is that as per December, we've kind of remained where we were, that just under half approximately of that 1.8% saving will be applied to rates and the remainder to debt. So what I'm hearing is the budget that we bring in March should have an average rates increase of 11.7 instead of 12.7, and the rest will go towards debt. Well, it would be the 0.8, 1.2.
Yeah.
Thank you, 1.2. I'm working backwards. Yes.
So it's 2.2 around about in total.
Yeah.
So we could put 1 to rates and 1.2 to debt.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
And just to
We might
clarify,
put that in the council paper.
I guess so. Just to clarify, so if that was the option, is that where you say that there would be $24 million worth of savings?
That's already actually been done.
So that's already been done. This would increase those savings?
Only minimally. So that's
Okay.
an additional 200,000. But yeah, it'll be slightly more than that.
Yeah, and you mentioned before was it $1,500 in savings?
Per
or
household.
Per household, thank you.
Councillor Puller, carry on.
You kind of did, but I kind of wanted to bring the conversation back to where that proportion is, because we agreed to apply the savings to both those areas, and so that's really the question before us is kind of what that proportion is. I was just going to make the point that if I understand the figures on page 143, it's 27 of the thing. If I understand that correctly, if we applied about something like 1.2 to the debt, is around $1 million, something like that, and this says for every $1 million reduction in the fund, the gap loans over the revised term of 10 years, there will be an associated 273k of interest savings, which over 10 years is 2.7 million. And if we apply, so I know Councillor Dennis was talking about applying all of those savings to the rates, and Councillor Isles, my point is that you would save our community $1 million and you would cost them 2.7 million. And that's the point that I'm trying to make here, is that, you know, a short-term reduction rates this year costs the community far more than twice as much. And so we say we're doing this because we feel for our community, and we do. We all know people are suffering, but you're actually putting more cost on them and more hurt by a decision to reduce rates over reducing the debt.
I don't think that's what Councillor Dennis was saying, put it all on the reduction in rates. He was splitting it.
What you said, wasn't it?
Wasn't that what you said?
That is
Yeah.
what you said,
Yeah.
And Councillor Isles as well. Yeah.
But look, just following on then from Councillor Tantros, you go back to this indicative property rates again, you look at the Murupara medium, their capital value was $170,000 and their rate is around about 11.7. That's the third highest rate across the whole district. There's no other category that comes anywhere near a capital value of 170. Taniatua, 310. Te Teko again, 210.
But you don't make it any better by deferring it. That's the point.
Look,
you just make it worse.
We've got debt, and we're going to have debt long after we've left this earth anyway. So, I mean, to them out there that are trying to survive, what the hell does it matter what our debt level is here?
Because they pay it.
Yeah, but they've been paying it. It's been increasing ever since we've been on Council Nandor. Have we ever pulled back and said, no, we're not going to do that? You refer it back to the FTEs. We've had that argument now. Okay, Steph assured us when she came up with the 32 that we'd fed into the process that it enabled her to come back to us with a 32. Now we're pushing like hell to get that number down as low as we possibly can. So again, you know, I rest my case, but...
We'll just borrow the whole thing. We won't have rates then. We'll just borrow everything. I mean, you know, you can't just keep increasing debt to pay for operating expenses. It doesn't.
It's not incur the deficit in the first place would be the prudent thing to do. But
most of our debt is capital. It's a different question.
It might be, but it's still got to be serviced, doesn't it? Whether it be capital or whether it be operational, whether it be short-term or long-term, it's still got to be serviced. And at the end of the day, it's the ratepayer, isn't it, that is servicing that debt. So
anyway, I think you characterised it correctly with what you said before, that we essentially haven't moved.
And today's not about decisions, but yes, I think it's really helpful for us to understand that the mood in the room is to continue with the direction now that you've really got the reality facing you and you understand all of these changes that, you know, have happened in the interim period. Because I mean that's another thing, we're navigating changes continuously. But when we bring the budget to you on the 20th of March, we will prepare a budget that has an average rates rise of 11.7% and the rest applied to debt.
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just have a question. We talked before, Councillor Boynton, about the savings and stuff. So the 20 million, is that made up of deferred works?
Do you mean the saving and total cost of debt over the 25 years?
Well, you're talking about 20 million savings. So what is that? Is that deferred work or is it something else?
No, sorry. The 24 million in savings is reducing the fund the gap loan repayment period from 25 years down to 10 years. So that's $50 million that we're choosing of operating deficits that we're choosing to fund over 6 years. Collect or loan fund over 6 years, but the repayment of that is a 25-year term. We reduced that term down to 10 years, which means the ratepayers save $24 million of interest costs. So just like paying your house off earlier or quicker saves you interest costs in the long run.
So is that where the 1,500 a household came?
Yes.
Okay.
May I suggest we adjourn for lunch? We're going to come back to how we pitch this, and we could potentially pitch it as into sort of variance to the community, because we're really here to do what the community wants. So let's let them have their say. But anyway, that's the after lunch bit. I think.
Because we were actually proposing to not consult. Let's have that consult.
Well, yeah, to consult or not to consult.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it comes down to how substantial this change really is. All right, so lunchtime, we'll see you in
consulting on whether you want your rates to.
an hour. 45 minutes.
You don't need an hour. Give us half an hour.
Half an hour, okay.
That's all they jumble.
Eat quickly, get out of
Thank you. All right, so we'll move to the last section around the annual plan, which is around consultation requirement. I will take the slides as read, but I'll give you a quick overview. So in terms of requirement, I'll move to the next slide. There is no consultation of the annual plan is not legislatively required unless we make some significant or material changes. Staff has gone through our significance and engagement policy and looked at the criteria, and we looked also at the materiality of the changes. Staff current recommendation is to not consult. We don't think that we need to consult, but we could do an information campaign. So there was a bit more information in the next slides. The rationale for it, you would have heard, is that the changes that we are proposing to make won't have impact, are not expecting to have impact on the level of service. In terms of rating impact, it will be beneficial to the ratepayer. In terms of financial impact, it's got also applying some savings to reduce the deficit is also a positive change. And in terms of materiality, we looked at the sort of key changes that are being made. Some of them are driven by our external environment and central government legislation, such as the changes in the transport work program. Yep. Sorry. Yes, and most of the proposals are keeping in with the strategic direction that was in the LTP. We are just making some adjustments, which is a normal process of the annual plan. I'll leave it here. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Lenny?
No, really just questions.
Yeah.
Just if there are any questions about that recommendation not to consult. Our expectation is that we would be consulting on the next annual plan, as is the normal practice. There'll be even more changes since the LTP was developed by this time next year. So 12 months from now, we expect to be coming to you to say, yes, we do need to consult, but currently we don't think we need to consult on this plan.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Thank you very much for the rationale.
Yep, I agree. I think you covered off. You said there's no material changes, no level of service impacts. And I think because we're going out with a reduced rate than what was proposed, I don't feel like it's something that we need to consult of. And as you said, we're doing an info campaign anyway, so I'm happy with that.
Anyone else? Yeah, timer on.
Limit of like, I don't know, 50 words. Yeah. Oh, that's even harder. Impact on Māori. I just, no significant change proposed. And I mean, I'm supportive about the non-consultation strategy, but I do have a concern around the fact that it says here no impact on Māori. Just looking at the tables that we had before, you've got Murupara, Te Teko and Tāne Atua, who have significant increases in comparison to their capital values, and they have the highest population in those townships are Māori. And also representative of our significant iwi that we have of Tūhoi, Ngāti Awa, and also Ngāti Manawa and Ngāti Whare. So that's 4 of our iwi. So I just want to question that part about no impact on Māori, because there is a definite change and it's quite significant in their rates. Yeah.
So the assessment is on the variation since the long-term plan. Obviously, yes, there was a great deal of consciousness around the impact on Māori of the long-term plan. The assessment of low significance is on the changes since for this annual plan. which, if anything, are only of beneficial nature, given that the rates are actually lower than the long-term plan predicted they would be.
Okay.
But yeah, take your point.
Just when we do the communication of whatever we come to, agreements on and et cetera, it'd be really good to put out there what they would have been at 12.7 and what they are now going to be at whatever we decide to do. And I think for the people like Te Teko, who's going up 15.5%, et cetera, even though the monetary value is different, it'd be really good for them to see it was going to be that, but actually now it's going to be this.
That's a really great
Because
suggestion.
people don't like looking at people, although, and I've said this before, they seem to concentrate too much on the percentage values rather than the what it.
Yep, thank you. We'll definitely bear that in mind. And I think also positioning it with the wider national narrative as well. As we did with the LTP communications, it will be important to look across what else is happening. Thanks.
Would a 1% increase in rates have been material, maintaining levels of service? I mean,
So it's a decrease, you mean?
no, if it were, I'm just looking at materiality.
Yeah, materiality is poorly defined in the Local Government Act, so it's there's an element of subjectivity. In this case, because we go down, I don't think it is material. If you're already increasing by a certain amount and you go further, it could be seen as material. But
What's the worst that can happen? We get a lot of people not going down the consultation path. We just get criticised for not having consulted.
I think that's probably inevitable, but I think what is most important is just holding the narrative that actually the changes since the LTP, I mean, we definitely received some critical feedback around the LTP, but I think the messaging around the fact that this is actually a positive change since the LTP, hopefully that will have effect.
The other thing is the change to the legislation that allowed annual plans to go through without consultation if there wasn't a material changes was a rate saving measure. So that's acknowledging the cost that comes with consultation. So if your annual planning process is consistent with what you've agreed and worked through with the LTP, that allows you to bank those savings.
I think you're right in saying, you know, if we're able to lead with the council decreases the rates and has savings of such and such for ratepayers, and then have that explanation. I mean, if we're able to lead with that heading in communicating, then you know it's been able to offset what would normally be the. What have they done to us now? Yeah.
We just need to be really cautious that we don't create an expectation that rates are going down because they are not. It is just that they aren't going to go up as much as was previously thought.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely agree with your sentiment. Thank you.
I was just wanting to get a sense from the room. So if we were putting together a council report, sorry, you might have already said this at the beginning, if we were putting together the report for the March council meeting on the annual plan, and we're putting in that two key things. The first one is that there is around about a 2.2% reduction, 1% going on rates, around 1.2%, or the balance going on the operating deficit. And that because there are no material changes to our levels of service, we don't need to consult. A council is sort of generally comfortable with debating that at the March 20 meeting. Awesome.
decided it's going to be a 1% reduction.
You haven't decided, you'll decide on the 20th of March.
No, but
we'll pitch
around
that
the
in.
table today, have we basically all decided that it will be a 1% reduction on rates and 1.2 towards internal debt?
That's where, it landed. To me, it felt like there was probably a majority saying, yeah, actually put that in the council paper.
Councillor James?
Reluctantly, I guess I could probably live with that, but I still really think the thing is hit the debt side of it hard and clean it up once and for all, or try and clean up as much as we can once and for all, and leave the rates at 12.7. But going to what's suggested is way better than dropping them way down and keeping the debt up. Thanks.
But on the consultation, we're all comfortable.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So
Well
that's
done.
it, I think.
That's the annual plan workshop component.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
awesome.
Well done. You're going to get more yeses when we've had lunch.
Phil is not due until 1:30.